Hello and welcome to another episode of Sanity Killer Projects. Today we are going to start disassembly on the 1953 Chevy pickup that I bought for my wife as a anniversary gift. We're going to build it up into a nice running truck. As of right now, it's just a rolling chassis, but I've got to get it down to the frame and get the frame into the garage. First part I'm going to pull off is going to be the hood, which, as you can see, the hood is not even attached. So that'll just come off and go under the carport area over there for storage until we're ready to reassemble. So let's get started. So as I had mentioned, the hood just came off. There's a few parts that would attach the hood. This is actually part of the hood assembly. This one isn't even a good example of that. There's more of the parts and pieces for it on this side. These three pieces would end up going to a bracket that would attach the hood. The bracket actually is this guy over here that would, all of it would attach, and then that would allow your hood to come off. In this particular case, the hood is in pretty rough shape and pretty beat up, so most of it and its hardware are probably all going to get replaced. Okay, so a lot of times people will disassemble these as the entire front clip, but I'm the only one out here. So the goal here is going to be to get the inner fender and the fender, and then get the front radiator assembly, and then get the other fender and inner fender. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to end up having to take the fender off of the inner fender separately so that I can get all the pieces off. But just a recommendation, in most of the builds and projects that I work on, we use all hand tools. In this case, definitely make sure you have some electric tools and air tools. There's a lot of disassembly on a car this old. Everything is has a bolt and a nut on almost everything, and there's usually too many bolts and nuts because these cars were built very heavy duty. They put lots and lots and lots of hardware on them. Also, if your truck has been sitting like mine has, make sure you use some sort of penetrating oil. I like WD-40. You can use penetrating oil. And also, everything on this car is going to be standard. Most of the parts are going to be 1/2 inch or 7/16. That's just how these older cars are. They don't put metric parts on old cars unless somebody's put some metric hardware in there along the way. Also, somebody tried to rewire the headlights at some point, so I've got a bunch of wires. They didn't go to anything. I just pulled them through the through the firewall. But at this point, I'm going to start disassembling the radiator assembly off, and then start taking the fenders apart. So we'll go to that next. All right, so if you're going to be disassembling the truck in the manner that I did, mine had no grill in here, but I plan on taking the front clip apart. So I've disassembled all the parts on the radiator mount, and the bottom plate comes off separately, even though you take all the parts off trying to get them out to come together. The only real tie piece is these end plates, and they go through the hardware for the radiator. So in this case, everything is off. So the lower plate has come loose, and the upper plate for the radiator mount should just lift right off, but it's gonna stick on the bottom carriage bolts. The bottom carriage bolts are 9/16, so I'm gonna have to pry this off with a bar to get it to come out of the mounts, and then this whole front section will be open, and the fenders and the inner fenders will actually be kind of floating. So I got to be a little bit careful with what I do, or they could end up dropping and falling off and tearing a bunch of the steel. But at this point, the front is starting to get disassembled, so we'll come back with the rest getting pulled apart. So there it is with the radiator mount off. I just wanted to show you. I make bags of bolts so that I don't lose anything. This is the radiator mount left side. Another bag sitting here, it's radiator mount right side. You can do it whatever way you want. I just don't recommend the common throw everything into a coffee can, because you're going to end up losing stuff. There's a lot of hardware sitting down in the bottom here. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. Some of it's to mount the radiator, which we didn't have anyway because we don't have a power plant in it. I'll take all of that stuff and put it in a coffee can, but you want to keep aware of what your hardware is, and keep it separate with the parts that you're storing for later use. I would recommend doing this and not the coffee can for sure, because of the fact that everybody thinks that they're going to get right back to reassembly. You won't. A project like this is always going to take some time unless you're a fabrication shop, and at that point you're going to have all the hardware you need anyway, and you won't need any of this stuff. So at this point I'm going to start disassembling the fenders off of it, and I'll make hardware bags for those, and then all the hardware stuff that I have sitting here is going to end up going into storage with the radiator mount. Everything that was on this was 7/16, ½ inch, 5/16, and 9/16 to get all this assembly off of it. So next I'll start working on the fender inner fenders. This side I have the left side fender off. One of the things I want to show is on the left side there's a bracket right here that disassembles the inner fender away from the firewall of the car. On this particular one, we snapped a couple bolts. I'm going to tell you now, this is really common on older vehicles. When you start disassembling things, because of their age, they'll snap the hardware right off. It's kind of a normal thing. You got to get used to it and expect to replace a lot of hardware. So next we'll disassemble the passenger side fender, and the whole front clip will be off. So there it is with the front clip off. There's a total of 7 bolts on each side that take a ½ inch. They go along this outer part of the body, and 3 go through the frame. On the other side they go through that bracket, and then they go through the exact same spot on the other side. If you do that and remove these 2 that were held in with 9/16, the carriage bolts, you can actually remove the entire front clip without disassembling it. But because of the way we wanted to take it apart, and because of the fact that I'm mostly out here by myself, it had to be disassembled. So that's what it all looks like sitting over there in the corner, all piled up and ready to go for when it has to be put back on, with bags for all the hardware. So now we'll start working on the back, and then get the parts off that we need for the body, and we'll have a completely loose frame. Alright, and at this point we started in the rear. We took the rear tailgate off. There's only 2 bolts that hold it in. There are 2 bolts on each side, I should say. The upper one stays in place. Came off with a ½ inch, both of them did. This one was backed up with a nut. This is the exact same thing on the other side. And then we took the utility bumper off. It took 2 3/4 bolts, bolt-in nuts here and here on both sides, and then drop down. I had to disassemble the rear tire carrier because the tire carrier was actually interfering with removing the bumper. That'll eventually come off too as we're going along. It's not as important. Not all these old trucks have the tire carrier on them, but our utility bumper is going to go away eventually. So mostly I just need the hardware, but we'll still store the bumper just in case things come up along the way and we decide we want to use it, or something similar that we can mock it up to. So next we'll keep disassembling the back. We've got a long way to go. So at this point I'm starting to disassemble the bed. I figured I'd show what's going on. Almost always these rails that hold the wood in place are worn out. These are actually in fairly good shape, but we plan on replacing them. They do have some holes in them from natural wear, like right there where it's just completely rotted through. But the easiest way to get these off is to grind them. It's a carriage bolt with a square nut on the bottom of it. The square nuts never move. The carriage bolts always spin. If you don't have to keep the rails in good condition, you can always buy aftermarket ones. There's lots of companies out there that make them, so that's what we're doing. I'm going to grind all the bolts heads off of these guys, and then replace the rails later. For right now it'll all just go in the pile of metal that's stuff we're keeping, but eventually these will get thrown out and we'll get new ones, and we'll get some probably oak or something for the bed. At this point we've disassembled the bed. My wife actually came out to help me strip it all apart. As you can see, most of the reason why I bought this truck is because it has good bones. The frame itself is entirely intact. It's got the original rear end in it, which is definitely coming out, and all of the wood sitting right there. So we'll get new rails and new wood and stuff when it comes to that time. At this point, we're just disassembling, and seeing as the light's going away, we may get a little bit more done, but most likely this is going to be the end of it for today, and then I'll pick back up another day. Alright, so I haven't got a lot of time to work today, but my goal here has been to try and disassemble the bed. So if you still have these side rails for the wood, there's a bolt that goes through this back plate. There's that'll take a 9/16. Also, there are two bolts here that take a 9/16, and in most cases that should be it for each side. Mine was welded here and here. I had to grind through the welds to get it to pop off. So now that it's broken loose, this is now separated from the two side pieces, but the problem is it's actually carrying all the weight. So this is one of the mounts. This is also one of the mounts. This is how it mounts through the bed and through the body, or through the bed frame, and then comes down to down here. That also is a 9/16. So these guys have to come off. And actually I'm wrong, these bolts that go through the end are 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch, 9/16, 9/16, 9/16, and then this will separate away. Problem is with the weight of it all sitting on here, I now have to break the bolts in the front on each side to get the rails with the fender to come off. So that'll be the next thing that I'm working on, but I've got this free and loose from the back of the bed, and everything else will start coming off soon. Okay, at this point we got the left side bed rail off. One of the things that I missed when we were doing this was there's another bolt on the back side right here, and those all broke when we took them off. But I'll show you on the front. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 7/16 bolts, and then there's a 1/2 inch that goes out of here, but it's a rod that runs all the way through and connects to the other side. As you can see on the other side, we've already got a couple of the bolts off, but that's pretty much all that's holding that rail on. I also cut the rest of the bolts off for the bed channels. Those, once I grind those other two off over there, will come right off. And I don't want to pull all the 4 main mount bolts off, because if I do, then there's nothing keeping the bed from falling off, especially since all the weight's now on that side. So these bolts are actually kind of keeping everything in place. But for now, left side is off, so I'll cut and remove some bolts on that side, and then that side will be off, and then I'll be able to undo the bolts to take the front and rear plates off, and then the bed will be done. All right, at this point, the other bed rail's off, and then the center supports came loose as soon as I cut the middle bolts, and then the tail came off when I pulled the bolts out of the side. These are actually your bed supports. There's 2 of them, one on each end. They go through a big mount block. As you can see over there, that one still has the block in it. This side doesn't have the block, but the bolts are still in. So as soon as I undo those 2 bolts, the bed is 100% off. Alright, with removing those 2 front bolts, that took the back plate off of the bed, or actually I guess it'd be the front plate for the bed. At this point, we have the bed and the whole front clip off of it. This will be a stopping point for a second day. As of right now, total I've got about 6 hours into it. The only points where I needed somebody else was any point I had to hold on to a big panel or push anything off. And if you look in there, that's all the pile of parts to this point. The only thing that's really left is there's 6 square bolts on the bottom side of the step. Those got to come out. That'll take this whole plate off. And then there's about 4 bolts that hold the cab, and then I've got another step on the other side that's got to come off. So once we get through all that, this will be done. Frame will be stripped. We'll push it over into the garage over there, but right now this is the stopping point for the second day. I really wasn't out here for very long. It only took me an hour or 2 to take apart the bed. But when we come back, we'll pull the fender flares and pull the body off, and car will go, or the truck will go into the garage. Alright, so as you can see, we've gotten one of the steps off, and I ended up having to blow the bolts off of it. They're all carriage bolts, and the carriage bolts spin in this little groove that they're in because there's a little tab that's bent down that's supposed to hold them in place, but with age and wear, they just either broke off, or I ended up having to hit them with a grinder. If in the event you're trying to take these steps off, you need a 7/16 8-point socket or square nut socket. There are 7 bolts that hold this in place. There's 2 on each of the rails, and then there's 1 on this bracket that goes through here, and it actually goes through the face of the step. The other panel I just left on. Once we actually get to the point where we're reassembling, I'll have to change all this stuff back up into cleaner, neater hardware, but at this point we're just trying to get the truck apart. So that's what we got. I got one more step to take off. It should look like that with it off, and then we'll start working on the body. So as you can see with the passenger side, I ended up having to do the same thing. I had to blow all the bolts off the grinder. A couple of them snapped off, and it's again the same 7 screws, so I'll start working on the body. So for your rear body hangers, the easiest way to get them off is to remove the bracket. It's got 2 holes through it. They take a 9/16, they go through the frame. They don't go through the body. There is a part of the bracket further up that goes up through the body, but if you do that, you got to take the seat out, and I'm trying to do as little as possible to get the body and stuff off of the frame, so this makes it to where I don't have to take the body, or I'm sorry, the seat out of the cab. The cab will get worked on later. At this point, I just want to get it down to this guy right here so that I can actually work on it. So I've got 2 more bolts in the front. Those ones go through the cab. They are placed on the passenger side where the battery tray is. It's right in front of it, and the other one is on the other side, just on the other side of the brake pedal. Okay, so the point right here, the body is off of the frame, but as you can see, the steering wheel is still connected through. So I have to disassemble a few things in the front, namely the steering wheel, a few things for the pedals, and then the body will be ready to come off, and I'll be able to put this in the garage. Okay, so the point we're at here, we're going to call it done. As you can see, the body has some 4x4s underneath that's separating it from the frame. I don't have enough people here to lift the body off of the frame, so at this point we're going to have to call it. The next time I show this, the frame here will be inside the garage, and we'll start working on disassembling the axles and plating the frame. So as always, thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Keep watching, and we'll keep making more videos. Thanks.